Hello, Bonsai lovers. Welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. It's me, Scott Martin. It's episode 10, season 6, if you can believe it. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening as always. And in this episode of the podcast, I want to talk about some really important stuff to me anyway. Stinks. My neighbours hate it. It's that time of the year where it's time to fire up the fertilising machine. So I want to go through and just have a bit of a chat about my process, an overview of it, because I get asked a lot of questions about this and what I do and how I do it and why I do it, whether I put into my soil mix, what I use, all that sort of thing. So it's going to be a brief covering of that in the podcast. Then I want to talk about another thing which is coming up, which I led to in last podcast, is fertilising of pines, and specifically Japanese black pines. Now's a bit of a tricky time because, you know, there's autumn's here, the weather's starting to cool down. In Melbourne, we've sort of feel like we've passed our peak. A few of the other capital cities, Adelaide, I know, are still getting flogged at the moment with some warm weather. But generally the days are definitely getting shorter. So the trees are going to start transferring from growth to storage with their systems. So fertilising is a really important thing. And with black pines, especially in the southern states, if you've been through and you've been decandling, then fertilising now can sort of make or break where the tree is going to get to in the next step. So I just want to talk about that too, because it's a really important time, and it's so easy to put a broad brush statement out there saying, oh, fertilise all your trees, or definitely don't fertilise your black pines yet. Wait until, you know, this time of the year and then do it. But it's the reasons why we do it, I suppose, as to why I want to talk about it. So that's the podcast for this week. Should be enjoyable. It's something that we all should be doing. Fertilising is super, super important. If you've got black pines, which a lot of people do have black pines in their collection, then this should be an interesting one for you too. So my process with fertilising is I use the tea bag method, which is not new, it's not complex. There's if you want to see what the tea bag fertilising method is, just jump onto the Bonsai Matsu YouTube channel and you'll see there's a very quick video there showing sort of how I do things and what I put into the tea bags. But just an overview of it is they're a tea bag that allows for the transfer of the goodness and keeps out the sediment from going into the pots. I don't want to go and spend all this time and effort putting in a really open, porous mix, only to put fertiliser directly onto the pot, which then goes and fills in and takes away the value of the soil mix that I've used. So the tea bag method for me sort of ticks that box. It means that my soil integrity remains intact. But the other reason why I use the tea bags is because I can use it like a switch where I flick it on and off. If I want to fertilise, I'll put the tea bag on. If I want to stop fertilising, I can just lift the tea bag off. So it's really, really simple and easy. And the tea bag has a life, has a shelf life. So once I put that onto the pot, give or take, it's around about a month. You know, it might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less. But basically the theory with it is that every time that I'm watering the tea bag, or watering my bonsai, then I'm offering something to the tree to grow, right? And it's not complex. It's not, you know, liquid feeding. It's not my preferred. I still like liquid feeding. If that's all you can do, then hey, go for it. If you can't use tea bags because you've got dogs in the backyard, as I've said many times before, then just do the best you possibly can. But for me, this segment of the podcast is to explain sort of how I do it and why I do it. And inside the tea bag, I put two simple components, nothing complex about it. There's no special formula. I don't get the scales out. I just roughly put in 50-50 mix of a blood and bone powder, which is, generic worldwide, very, very light on nitrogen. It's not over the top. It's not got anything added to it. There's nothing extra on the bag. I always buy the very basic one that I can get from the hardware store. And the other is just an organic pellet fertiliser. There are brands of it, but I'll basically see whatever's on sale at the hardware store, and I'll use that. I don't stick with the brand for the fertilising. But again, it's got to be purely organic. I don't want anything extra. I don't want soil wetters. I don't want long-lasting fertiliser incorporated. I don't want anything. I just want the basic run-of-the-mill. And when you look at the back of the bags for the components, the breakdown of the fertiliser, they're very, very similar. Very, very. The blood and bone and the pellet are very almost identical. All right, and the reason why I put two of them in there is because I feel that the blood and bone breaks down really quickly. So it gets through, it dissipates, and the fines, really get through the tea bag quite quickly when I start watering. So I know that from day one, from second one, as soon as I water, I feel like I'm offering something to the tree through the blood and bone. The organic pellets, they take a little bit longer to break down, like they got to swell, and because it's wet dry, they sort of re-harden over and over again. So I find that they're more of a slow release of the nutrients for the tree. So I can justify it to myself, and again, this is that self-justification thing that it works for me. It's something that I've done for so many years now, this same consistent mix, that I've got that reliability and consistency, and I can almost bank on what I'm going to get out of it. One tea bag will equate to X amount of growth or X amount of strength for a tree at this stage of its development, or this period after repotting, whatever it is. So I know that when I apply 2, I can multiply that out. If I put 4 on there, I can grow it even further. And that's really important for me, because as we go into autumn, I know this is the time where my trees are going to be building their strength. They're going to be storing it away to get through the dormancy that's just around the corner. Now the daylight hours have changed. The leaves on most of the deciduous have just started to turn a little bit again now that we're sort of getting these colder nights as well. So I know that it's that time. It's definitely time for me to start putting fertiliser on there, because I want them to increase their strength. I want them to come out of the gates at the end of winter going into spring like a mad bull. I want them to jump out and just go crazy. So by me building their strength now, I know what's going to be happening in 6 months' time. And that's the point of fertilising for me, is it's a long game. It's not something that I do to get an immediate result right now. It's a slow working machine that I know that if I do the right thing now with my trees, then I'm going to be getting the dividends for it somewhere into the future. So the reason why, and this is a response to a question, the reason why I don't put fertiliser into the soil mix is I can't control that. I can't turn it off and on. And how do I know when what I've put into the soil has expired? And often people will mix in a pellet and a chemical-based fertiliser, which is great too, slow-release fertiliser, normally known as something like Osmocote, and that's fine. It's in a lot of potting mixes and stuff like that, not necessarily bonsai mixes, but potting mixes will have it in there, and those sort of things maybe get renewed once a year, so it really helps on that front. But for me, I find that once you put fertiliser into the soil itself, you lose complete control, and you might gain a sense of safety or security that's unfounded, So I want to be able to turn off my fertilising at the end of autumn. There's no point fertilising for me during dormancy periods, during summer. I don't encourage new growth during summer, and I don't want to fertilise when the tree's sleeping effectively during the dormancy of winter. So my two times of the year that I fertilise, spring and autumn's a double feed, so I want to really ramp it up. Now, if I had fertiliser in the soil from repotting last, late winter, early spring, is it still going to be there in autumn? If it is, am I going to overdo it? And, will the chemicals then effectively burn the roots when the tree goes through a dormancy period? You just have so many unknowns with it that, for me, I know, I'll reiterate, if all you can use is Osmocote because of whatever reason it is, then that's great. Use it, please, because you have to, giving them something is far better than giving them nothing. But for me, it's always about what's the best thing that I can possibly do. And for me, in my mind, based on my experience and what I can achieve with my trees, my yard, my watering, my soil mix, everything that sort of builds up my bonsai world, using these tea bags for me is by far the best, because we're coming into autumn. As I said, I want to increase my fertiliser. It's effectively, I put a figure on it that I want to fertilise twice as much during the autumn period as what I do during the spring period. But sometimes it's more than that. Most times it's more than that. Like if I put, one bag on a tree, during spring, then in autumn it might be 3 or 4 bags per month, because I know that what I'm putting on there at this time of the year is purely going to strength. There's a little bit of foliage growth at the start of autumn. The trees are tricked a little bit, I suppose, with the still nice, lots of sunshine around the place. Also, they'll push a little bit of growth out there. There's still some warmth in the air. So they go, yep, it's growing. And then those daylight hours keep getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And then all of a sudden the tree flicks a switch and goes, nah, I'm going into preservation mode. I'm going to go and start storing this away, as opposed to pushing foliage growth. And that's the time when their fertilising for me really ramps up. So it's something that I can multiply out using the tea bags. It's something that I can turn off when I want to turn it off. And if I get a tree that's maybe a bit on the weaker side, which is the next part of this podcast I'm going to jump into in a second. If I get a tree that's slightly on the weaker side, then I can maybe use that fertilising, the multiplication factor, that I can help it a little bit more and say, well, you know what, you're in real need of this. So you're going to get liquid feed, you're going to get foliar feeding, you're going to get tea bags put on there, whatever it is. I can use this time of the year to really ramp things up to say, let's get you through until I can fix whatever's caused the problem. If it's repotting, then let's get you through until repotting season, when I can fix whatever the problem is and go forward. But fertilising is one of those things that I really like to put my thumb on and make sure that I'm on it as much as I possibly can be. I've got hundreds and hundreds of bags of fertiliser made up now, ready to go, and I can guarantee that once this podcast is finished, wrapped up, and put a bow on it, I'm walking out to my trees and I'm putting it on the trees, and the neighbours will just love me for it. But it's one of those tasks that it has to be done. It has to be done as efficiently as I possibly can, because there's so many trees to manage in the yard. And I find that tea bags are great because I do it once for a month and then I don't have to do it again for another month. It just gives me that peace of mind that it's done, it's simple, it's easy, and it's something that's repeatable, it's multiplied, out over and over again, and gives me great consistency of results that I can really bank on going into the future for the planning for that particular bonsai. All right, let's talk pines, specifically Japanese black pines, but we'll talk about quite a few different varieties throughout this podcast, and timing of work and that sort of thing, because there's a lot of itchy fingers out there trying to get their scissors out and their tweezers and get into the pines. So it's timely, I think, especially for us down south in Australia. If you've decandled your pines, I suppose this is who I'm talking to in this part of the podcast. It's important to work out when you can and can't, or should and shouldn't. You can do whatever you want whenever you want. They're your trees. But from my perspective, the advice that I give out for black pines on when the work can start, it's one of those periods where just waiting a little bit longer might be better for the bonsai. And the reason for that is that there might be a little bit of wind in the sail still. They might still have a little bit more growing to do. So let's break this into two different scenarios for black pines. You've got one black pine that wasn't decandled, and then the other one is that you've got a pine that was decandled. All right, so the first part of the podcast is going to talk about when you can work on the different pines. So if it's not been decandled, then I feel that it's okay now to start doing some work on them, because normally if they haven't been decandled, there's a reason for it. Like you've tried to improve the health of the tree, the strength of the tree. Maybe it's a young tree that you're developing, whatever it is. So you'll have let it go. The needles will be quite long on the thing by now, and the new spring buds will be quite dominant. And you might find that there's more than one at the tip as well. There might be 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, but they're normally quite big. So the work that you're going to be doing on that tree is going to be pretty much a basic sort of work. So it might be some needle plucking to open things up, and it might be some wiring, something like that. Just don't forget that the more needles that you have on a pine tree, the stronger they get. The stronger they get, the more chance you've got of back budding, all that sort of thing. So just be mindful that when you're working on your black pines, that it might be worthwhile just holding off a little bit longer with the needles and keep them a little bit scrappier, so that way you'll get that more of that back budding and more strength into the tree. Because if you haven't decandled, there's a reason for it, right? You need to just stick with the plan, whatever it is. It doesn't need to look brilliant on your bench. It doesn't need to look like a masterpiece at this stage. So if that's the case, then let it go. But if it is time to start working on it, and you've got some of these trees in your stock that you want to work on, then not decandled are the ones that I generally start with. Always plucking the old needles towards the new, leaving the new, and trying to get to balance, which I'll come back to. The other is you've got a black pine that was decandled. Now, so decandled black pines at this time of the year, and I'm talking very early into autumn/fall, where things have only just started to turn, and fertilising is just at the starting gates for your trees, for your collection. You need to be really, really careful with the black pines that have been decandled. They're another kettle of fish. If you've got, we'll talk about fertilising of trees that weren't decandled. If part of the plan is to build strength on those things, and you're not really worrying too much about that fine detailed ramification, get onto fertilising as you would all the other trees. All right, that's my simple advice. Fertilise now, get into it, build the strength of the tree. If they're a decandled black pine, then there's an assessment that needs to be made. Normally the advice for any black pine that's been decandled is don't fertilise this time of the year, because you want to wait for the growth to finish. So for the tree to finish the growing period, to set those needles in its sheath and go, right, that's as much as I'm going to grow, and then you can move into the fertilising stage. Because if you go into it too early, what can happen is the small internodes that you've created, the shorter needles that you've worked on with decandling, can be destroyed pretty quickly, because a tree will grab the fertiliser you put on there, pump the nitrogen through, and everything starts to continue to grow. So if and this is where every single person listening to this will need to make the assessment themselves on their tree based on where they are, how much is left in this growing season, what stage the black pine's at when you look at it. Have the needles. One of the telltales is when the needles start to change colour. So on your decandled black pines, you should look at them now and go, old needles, nice and olive, nice and dark. New needles, still a bit limey green, still a bit bit brighter. And the other way you can do it is for the needle setting in the sheath. If you grab the old needles and just give them a little bit of a tug with your fingers, you'll find that there's resistance. There's a bit of a firmness there setting in the sheath. When they're still growing, they're quite soft. So the newer needles, you'll just grab them and they'll come out really, really easily when you pinch and pull them. So maybe use that as a bit of a test as well. But I generally use the colour of them being the telltale that they've still got a bit more push left in them, that they haven't stopped. Now, the general approach is, if they're in that phase, don't fertilise them, just leave them alone. But what I want to talk about is you can use fertiliser when you look at your black pines that have been decandled. If you look at them and you think, wow, those buds are pretty small. And this is a common thing that I get at this time of year. I get a lot of photos sent through and a lot of concern saying, hey, I decandled. These things still haven't moved very much. That's where you can use fertiliser to try and help the situation. It's not guaranteed to help the situation. There may have been a strength deficiency or something like that with the tree, where maybe, the decandling was a 50-50 back, back in summer. You've done it anyway, and now this is the sort of impact where the tree's gone, I'm just a bit too weak. I can't keep pushing these buds. I find that when I get trees like that, by putting fertiliser on early in this part of autumn, you can help a little bit to try and push them, because you've still got another month or so of growth left in the pines before they start to set those needles in place. Normally, right? Sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later, but generally there's about, from the start of the calendar date of autumn, you've generally got about a month or so left of growing for these pines to still keep pushing needles. So I find that it's really important to go around through all your trees and not just lump them into a category saying, yep, decandle black pines, just leave them alone, don't touch them, just keep watering and put them to the side. Actually go through and break them into categories and go strong, medium, weak, and the weak ones just go, you know what, I've got to do something about this. I can't leave these things with these tiny little buds that have pushed out where if I don't get needles next year next spring, then I'm going to have a real issue with this, because the needles on the pines only last a couple of years. And once they've gone past a couple of years, they start to fall off. You might get 3 years out of them, but they start falling off because the tree doesn't need them. They need that continual cyclical nature of new needles to come out on them every year to continue to grow, to photosynthesize, to do what they do, right? So fertilising a weak decandled black pine early can really help the cause. And in my mind, if the pine's weak now anyway, then I'm more concerned about the future health and strength of this tree as opposed to the tightness of the ramification I'm going to achieve. Because if I don't do something about this early, there might not be a future bonsai to worry about. So if I can get the strength up on this tree now, then there's still a chance that decandling when summer gets here later this year, then I've still got a chance to do it if I can get the strength improved now. And that's where fertilising your weak decandled black pines early can help you. So by forgetting the general guidelines of what to do, and this is this is where the care guides and all that sort of stuff comes into it, because my feelings on them, that I don't think that they're always in the best interest. They're written with good intent, but they can't be followed to the T, because this is where the individual assessment comes in. And your trees. You see them every single day, hopefully multiple times every single day. You look at those trees and you can tell when the needles or the foliage starts to change colour, or something doesn't grow quite right when it should be growing. If you push something where it's hurt, where it should be hurting, and it doesn't hurt, well, you've got to keep an eye on these things. And this is where your intuition, your bonsai intuition comes into it. Your love for this tree kicks in and you go, something's not right. This isn't working. And hence the reason why I'm talking about it now, because I get a lot of messages about it this time of the year. And the advice is always the same. Maybe start fertilising this thing a little bit earlier. Is it in the best position it can possibly be in too? Maybe it's in a position where it's not getting enough sunlight. Something changed. Is there something you can do about it? Is it getting enough water? Is it too dry? Maybe it's on the dry side. Has it suffered from any? Do the full assessment, but definitely throw fertiliser into the mix that you can help push those new little buds, the needles along a little bit more. Give them a bit of a oomph, so the tree can then take the next step. The other thing that I find that's really common too, while I'm thinking about it, is that trees that maybe weren't repotted when they should have been repotted, that got decandled, that maybe aren't getting the water into their system like they should, fertilising a tree like that won't make any difference, because the fertiliser will just run off the edge with the water there as well. So you might need to do something with freeing up the root ball a little bit. And my simple approach is, a nice heavy-duty chopstick or a Phillips head screwdriver, something like that, into the pot and just gently aerate it a little bit. Get half a dozen spots around the pot, more for a bigger pot, less for a smaller pot, obviously. But do something like that to the tree as well, to try and help that water penetrate the inner root ball. That could be part of the reason why the buds haven't grown quite as well as what they should have. So Fertilising is one of those things that, if a key guide said to me, tree decandled, don't fertilise until XYZ, you might find that on some pine, some Japanese black pine, that if it's been decandled and it's really weak, that you might not get those buds pushing at all. And there might not be a chance to fertilise in autumn. So therefore the tree misses out on that opportunity to build its strength, to get through dormancy and then come out spring the other side, a bit stronger than what it was in the past. So I would make that individual assessment definitely of your pines, your black pines, to determine whether you can use fertilising early to give it a bit of a push. If you look at the tree, everything's coming along hunky-dory, maybe the needles are just a little bit smaller than what you wanted, the buds are a little bit smaller, but at each point for decandling there's 2, 3, 4 buds starting to grow in that area. They're the ones that I'd probably suggest, I'd definitely suggest saying hold off on fertilising just now, because if they've got that limey green colour, if the needles aren't set in the sheath, then you've still got more chance for growth to happen on those buds. So you might find that when you look at it and go, yeah, that internode length is bloody perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. Holding off fertilising on those ones now is beneficial, because they'll still grow a little bit more, so those internodes will push a little bit further. The needles will start to change colour and set. Maybe they've got a little bit more growth in the needle length as well over the next month or so. Hold off fertilising those ones. But if you look at them and instinctively you look at it and go, that is kind of weak, jump on the fertiliser early. Don't hold back. The most important thing I find with getting my pines to that next level, to that really high-end level, where you look at them and just go, that's lovely, that's really, really nice. Like that's perfect. There's good growth everywhere. It's all about balance, balancing your trees. And I talk about balancing a lot with, the strong areas need to be made a little bit weaker, the weak areas need to be made a little bit stronger. That set of scales, from one dominating and the other one suffering, needs to be changed, where they're both pretty much on the same level. And we can use the work we're going to do on our pines to get there, and holding off fertilising stronger trees means that we can help that balance get a little bit more correct. Fertilising trees that are weak, try and balance it out again too. So, and that's the next target that we want to have with our pines when we get to work on them all. It really doesn't matter which pine it is or which tree it is. Your deciduous, your natives, your pines, whatever it is, you want to make sure that your growth is balanced evenly across the entire spectrum of that tree's foliage. And that's your target. That's what you want to get to. So when it comes to things like we're going to do needle plucking and wiring and shaping and moving things around, and we're going to get access to sunlight, the key to it is ensuring that your focus, your target is always going to be about the balance of the tree. So if you are going to get into your pine work earlier, then keep that in mind, especially for developing trees. Where you've got those, you haven't decandled it, it's maybe a fresh tree that you just come to your collection, you're ready to start doing some work on it. Look at the areas of strength. Don't go for magnificent bonsai now. Go for, okay, this area, this branch looks a bit weaker. It's lower down the tree typically. I need to leave more needles there. So before you start plucking everything off within an inch of its life, start looking at going, okay, strong area, pluck more, cut more. Weaker area, pluck less, cut less. And then, next year when those scales get a little bit closer, then you can start doing more of that refinement work and bringing things close together. But that's basically it in a nutshell for what I do with my trees and what I'm looking at now with my pines, with fertilising. Other species of pine, my Scots, my Mugos, my white pines, radiatas, any of that sort of stuff, I'm putting fertiliser on them at this time of the year, because they've all done what they've had to do. They've been, if they've had candle cutting on, say the Scots pines and the radiatas, Mugo, then they've set all their buds for next spring. So putting fertiliser on them now just is all about the strengthening of the tree. So white pines, typically my refined white pines aren't fertilised during the the spring period because I don't want to push that growth. I don't candle cut on my white pines, but now is the time that I build strength in those trees. So I fertilise my white pines quite heavily at the moment. Of all the pines that I've got, they're the ones that get the biggest dose of fertiliser because it has the biggest oomph for that tree's strength, which is where I want to focus my resources for a white pine. The stronger the tree is, a white pine I'm talking about, the stronger it is, the more chance you've got of back budding. So back budding's what is in the back of my mind always with the whites, but the other pines too, I'm fertilising them quite heavily now. Am I doing work on them just yet? No, I'm not. For me, really, April, May is my big time, and my better quality trees are towards the end of that period, right before I get to even into June. I'll be doing some pine work, but I want to hold off and make sure that this growing period, this chance now for the tree to pull in resources from its branches, from its needles, from its foliage, from its root system to build up its strength to get through this dormancy, get that nice thickening of the trunk happening as well. I want to make sure that that's done thoroughly before I take the next step with working on them. That's it, folks. It's getting to be a busy time of the year. It's a time of the year where my neighbours always look at me funny, so I'll go for a walk around the neighbourhood because of the stink. It's the time of the year where I keep the doors to the house closed because if the wind blows the wrong way, well, it sets the dog off and sets off my whole family, basically. But it's a really important time of the year, so get on it. Make sure that you fertilise your trees. This is a really big opportunity. You've got to improve or increase or maintain the strength of your tree. Just because your tree looks great now doesn't mean it's going to look great next year. Fertilising right now doesn't give you anything tangible that you can put your finger on in the next week or so or 2 weeks and say, yeah, I'm doing it, it's great. This is a long-term game. So when spring gets here and you're sort of a month into the growing period and you're looking at things going, wow, look how good this looks, well, that's a pat on your back for what you've done almost right now with your trees. So don't skip it. Don't miss it. It's going to be easy to miss fertilising because it is one of those jobs that's very unrewarding right now. But it's the future bonsai that you're working towards, and it's really important. I love it. Pines, it's coming up. It's getting really, really close. So just make your decision wisely as to whether you jump into them or whether you don't. It's for me, I'm sort of holding off a little bit longer where I can. Still doing work on finishing up on cedars and junipers and that sort of stuff. So I've still got plenty of stuff to do around the yard. So it's okay, I'm busy. But if you've got itchy fingers, just look at those areas of new growth. If it was decandled, hold off a little bit longer. If it wasn't, well, maybe you can start getting to those ones. But anyway, thanks very much for sticking around. Really appreciate the patronage. You guys and girls are fantastic and a massive source of inspiration, and I hope you're still enjoying the podcast as much as what I'm enjoying putting it together. So give your trees a cuddle, give them some fertiliser, put the peg on the nose, tell your family it's for a very good cause, and until next time, happy bonsai.